Okay, we're admitting people. Ricardo, feel free to help out there, admitting folks into the room. All right. Hi, everybody. Good evening. It's Thursday. The week is almost over. Hello, hello. We're a little early.
Oh,
We're a little early, but that's good. Those of you out there watching us on Facebook, thank you for being with us this evening. We know that there's so much more you could be doing, but you're out there watching us. I'm sure you're watching TV at the same time, have dinner going on and kids to talk to and things. So thank you for us. Those of you in the Zoom room, thank you for being with us. We're going to get started in just a second. All right. The PowerPoint can come down. All right. Hello, hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. We want everybody out there on Facebook Live to see this room.
Buenas noches, todo el mundo. Buenas
Hello.
noches.
buenas noches.
Hello. Yes. Buenas noches.
Buenas noches.
Hello, everyone. We're going to get started in just a second. It is 7 o'clock on the dot. Folks are joining us. We appreciate you being with us this evening as the Zoom room fills in. Thank you. Thank you. Good to see you. Good to see you.
Tan pronto el cuarto de Zoom se llene, pues empezaremos la conferencia.
If you are able, please turn on your video. We'd love you. We'd love to feel connected to you. If you are able, please turn on your video.
Si pueden poner el video, lo pueden poner ahora. Nos encantaría que se unieran a la reunión en video.
Good evening, all. Good evening, all. I see that we're being joined right now by some state representatives. See the Zoom room fill in. Thanks, everyone, for being with us today. Good evening. Good evening. Started in just a second. No music. We didn't want to get shut down on Facebook, so we're not playing any music. But okay. Hi, everybody. Good to see you. Thank you for joining tonight. Thank you for joining.
Buenas noches todo el mundo que está escuchando en español. Vamos a continuar la conferencia en español, la conferencia en Zoom.
All right. Feel free, Aaron said a good example there. Feel free, put in the chat box down below. Tell us where you're joining from. Tell us your name. Where are you joining from? I see Allentown is joining us. Pittsburgh. Where are you joining us from tonight? Fill in the chat.
Por favor, díganos de dónde están llegando. Lo pueden poner en el chat, por favor.
Billy.
Oh, wait.
County. Good to see you all. Good evening.
Almost on it, Daddy.
Good evening. Good to see you. All right, we're gonna get started in just a second. Looking as the room. Good to see everybody. All right. How's everybody doing tonight? Can we get some? This is part town hall, part rally. How we doing? We're coming towards the end.
Woo!
Yes. All right. Good to see your faces. Good to see your faces. All right. Some few housekeeping things here before we get started.
Notas de la agenda de la conferencia de hoy.
All right. If everyone can keep themselves on mute to start off tonight, please put yourself on mute.
Por favor, manténganse en mute para que no se puedan oír los comentarios o los background noises.
And we are proud to present tonight's presentation in Spanish and in English. Language access, hashtag language access, very important.
Vamos a tener la presentación en inglés y en español hoy y ahorita les indicamos cómo pueden participar en español.
In just a moment, we're going to open up the Spanish interpretation room.
En un momento vamos a abrir el salón de interpretación en español.
It'll be at the bottom of the screen. You'll see a globe.
Va a estar abajo, en el screen abajo, van a ver un globo como un mundo.
And you're going to select to go into a Spanish speaking room.
Y ahí ustedes van a poder seleccionar a cómo entrar a una sala de habla hispana en español.
Right. Thanks everybody for joining us. We're going to get started in just a second as people still fill in. I'm going to open up the Spanish interpretation room right now. I want to thank the Mendoza group for being with us this evening. They are providing translation services so that we can make sure that tonight's presentation is accessible. We need to make sure everybody can hear this message. So I'm going to open up.
Ahora vamos a abrir el salón de interpretación en español y pueden unirse a ese programa y les damos las gracias al grupo de Mendoza por ayudar en esta traducción.
All right, interpretation has begun. Now is going to be your translator for this evening. Those of you who need to go to the Spanish interpretation room, you can go there now. All right, okay. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. We're ready to get started. Good to see everybody tonight. My name is Kadita Kenner. I'm Director of Campaigns for the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center. Very pleased to be with you tonight. If you can, I see everyone's doing a great job of keeping themselves on mute. So thank you for that. We have a lot to get through this evening. We will have opportunities for questions and answers. We're going to have a breakout room available for you later on so you can ask even more in-depth questions that you may have. And as you saw, this presentation tonight is in English and in Spanish. And that's just the start. One day we're going to grow. We're going to grow this language access and get some more languages into this mix as well. So thank you for being with us. All right, so tonight you are joining a very important presentation. We are joining tonight it's a People's Budget Town Hall. It's the kickoff, the rollout of what it is we want to see happen here in Pennsylvania. So I'm going to just read something that you probably already saw, especially if you registered for this event, which is that a budget is a moral document. It is a statement of our values and our priorities. And We the People who is bringing this to you tonight, made up of lots of great organizational partners who will shout out in a moment, are bringing this to you this evening. The We the People campaign, we want to make sure that the budget, the state budget, works for everyone. If you are Black or white, Latinx, Asian, rich, poor, native born, or immigrant, we want the budget to work for all of us. And the goal of tonight's event is to look at the challenges faced by our state government in meeting the needs of the people, and not just in difficult times, but beyond it. So if we learned anything about this global pandemic, is that it really has put a spotlight on the inequities in this state and in this country. So we believe that the beginning of the solutions to all these challenges that we're going to present tonight can be found in Governor Wolf's proposal, his 2021-2022 budget proposal, which we support. The We the People campaign supports this. And so tonight's going to be a very interactive event, and we're going to look at the governor's budget in context of broad long-term vision for Pennsylvania. So we're going to talk about 4 key issues this evening. We're going to talk about tax fairness. We're going to talk about minimum wage and housing and education, K through 12 and higher education. And so we envision a people's budget, a process that brings all of our voices into the process of the state government and our state budget. And so we can advocate to create the state budget that we all need and that we all deserve and that we all want. We need to make sure it works for all of us. So round of applause for all of you out there tonight who on 7 o'clock on a Thursday cared about the state budget. Yes, you are a special crew and we love you. So thank you for being with us tonight. We're going to have a good time. All right, so what we want to do right now is I want to thank our partners, and we're going to give them a shout out in a second. They're going to see their names flash upon the screen when we pull up the PowerPoint. But I want to thank those partners for being with us tonight. We the People campaign is made up of so many great organizations across the state who are doing the work. And we want to thank them for being involved in this campaign and who put this together. The staff of the Keystone Research Center, the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center, who put all of this together, the hard work. It took weeks, many weeks to put all this together. So shout out to all those folks. And I also want to give a shout out to our state legislators who are joining us in the Zoom room right now. Can someone help me out? Can you see who's in here? I saw Representative Patty Kim. I don't know if you want to wave at us, Representative Patty Kim. She's with us this evening. Any other state reps want to wave at us so we can see that you're here supporting the people's budget? All right. Well, in the meantime, we're going to now kick this off and start tonight's presentation because we have so much to cover. There will be, like I said, breakout rooms tonight. There's going to be some interaction, some polls for you to take, and we're just ready to get this started. So Lavana's going to launch the PowerPoint presentation, and we're going to get this going. And thank you for being with us today. And as she launches that, I'm going to pass the microphone off to Mark Steer, and he's going to shout out the partner organizations as well on that next slide.
So let's look at the next slide. It's good to be here with all of you today. I'm Mark Steer. I'm the chair of the We the People campaign. All of our partners, I think, are represented here. CASA, Black Voters Matters, Pennsylvania United, Make the Road Pennsylvania, Com Squared, For Future Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania Stands Up, Power, SEIU State Council, 6 and 1 PA, and we're very grateful for their presence as part of this campaign and their presence here tonight. So we're going to start talking about taxes. Now, no one likes to pay taxes, but we know that taxes are necessary to fund the government programs that benefit all of us. Going on the next slide, you can see there are two key questions people ask about taxes. One is, are they fair? Next slide, there they are. Are they fair? Does the tax system ask people with higher incomes and more wealth and big corporations to pay more than those with lower income and less wealth? And the second question is, do taxes raise the money we need to invest in people and in our communities? Those two questions are related. We know that over the last 40 years, income and wealth has become increasingly more unequal in Pennsylvania, just like it has in the United States as a whole. So if we're not going to tax higher income families in our corporations at the same or a greater rate than lower income ones, we're just not going to have enough money for government, and it'll shrink and will do less than it should be doing. So we're going to have some questions for you to answer, just to give you a chance to interact with this presentation. And so, Kadita, you want to launch the first polling question?
Sure. All right. So we have some polling questions for you this evening. I'm going to launch the first one right now. And this isn't, this isn't school. This isn't a test. So there's no judgment here. We want you to be able to answer these polling questions. And you can take the poll here on the screen, or you can put your answer into the chat box. If you'd like to, you can put your answer in the chat box. But here is the first question of the evening. It's a true or false question. State government spending in Pennsylvania has been growing larger or greater in the last 20 years. What do you think? Is this true or is this false? Has state government spending in Pennsylvania been growing larger and greater in the last 20 years? All right, I'm going to give some more time here for some folks to answer. You can answer on the poll. You can answer in the chat box. We want to see what you're saying. Right now, the false is winning. There are still folks who believe it's true. Could it be true? Is the state government spending in Pennsylvania, has it been growing larger and greater in the last 20 years? True or false? All right. 59% of you have voted, or 61%. We're still rising here. I'm gonna give you another few seconds for folks trying to find this. You can answer this polling question. All right, we'll get faster as these go along. All right, we're gonna end this poll. The results of this poll I'll share with you. At this moment, there were 13 of you who believe the answer is true. 23 of you believe it's false. That's 64% of you believe this is false. I'll stop sharing and turn this back over to Mark.
So let's go on to the next slide, Lavana. The correct answer is that state government is in fact shrinking. It's also employing fewer people. This slide shows you how much of all goods and services produced in Pennsylvania, what economists call the gross state product, is spent by the state of Pennsylvania. You can see that the state government is getting smaller, not larger. That's why, as we'll see, the state spends too little for education at all levels. And it's also why it spends too little for housing and for other areas which we won't have time to cover tonight: healthcare, roads and bridges, and transit, and many other things. Now we're going to look at how much income the different income groups in Pennsylvania receive and the taxes they pay. Let's go back, Lavana. We're not quite there yet. And that brings us to a second polling question.
All right, question number 2, 3, and 4 are here for you to answer. Feel free to fill in the poll here or put it in the chat box. So if you see the first question here, it says, what is the average yearly income of the top 1% of income earners in Pennsylvania? This is a multiple choice question. What is the average yearly income of the top 1%? You hear about those folks all the time. They're really rich. What is their income? Is it $450,000 a year on average? $1.6 million a year on average? $99,000 a year on average? Or $5 million a year on average? Next question is.
Kadita, I'm sorry, I don't think we're seeing the full questions.
Okay, sorry, thank you. All right, here we go. So now you get to answer that first question I just mentioned. What is the average yearly income of the top 1% of income earners in Pennsylvania? To answer that polling question. The next one is, what is the top annual income for the lowest 20% of incomes in Pennsylvania? Who's out here really needing to make more income? Are they folks who are making $13,000 a year, $20,000 a year, or $39,000 a year? And then the final polling question, in Pennsylvania, which income group pays a higher percentage of their income in taxes? Is it those folks in the lowest 20%? Is it the folks in the middle class? Or is it that top 1%, all those folks who are making lots of money? Who pays a higher percentage of their income in taxes? Right, we'll give it another 10 seconds. Go ahead and fill it in or put it in the chat box if you want. All right, half of you have taken the poll so far. Come on, take the polls. All right, we're gonna end it. Check out the results. So what you all believe who are watching tonight, the majority of you believe that $1.6 million a year is the average yearly income of the top 1%. Next up, we have what the top annual income for the lowest 20% is. It's tied. Some think it's 13,000, some think it's 20,000. Few people think it's 39,000 a year. And then in Pennsylvania, which income group pays a higher percentage of their income in taxes? And so here we're still, pretty good amount of people thinking it's the lowest 20%. Some thinking it's the middle class. Nobody believes it is the top 1%. So I'm going to share that so you can see, and then I'm going to stop this and turn it back over to Mark.
Okay, now we go on to the next slide, Lavana. And what it shows you is our tax system's totally upside down. And most of you actually know that, which is great because it's that kind of information that's going to help us change the state. The 20% of Pennsylvania families with the lowest incomes have an average of $13,000 a year in income, and the top income in that group is $20,000. They pay 13.8% of their income in state and local taxes. The 20% of Pennsylvania families with incomes in the middle range, with an average income of $54,000 a year, pay 11.1% of their income in state and local taxes. But the 1% of Pennsylvanians with the highest incomes, with an average income of $1.6 million, pay only 6% of their income in state and local taxes. Now, that should outrage you. This upside down tax system is just totally unfair. It's wrong for families at the top to pay a lower share of their income in taxes than those in the middle at the bottom. And moreover, because rich families make so much more than poor families, the state raises far less money than it should if the rich paid their fair share of taxes. Do you remember the last slide? It shows the state is government is shrinking. No matter what some people in Harrisburg say, it's shrinking. And it's shrinking because we're not taxing the rich enough to bring in the money we need for the kind of state government we want. And that brings us to another polling question. Does this have to be this way?
All right. Okay. Here's the final polling question under tax fairness. I'm going to look at this poll. All right. Do other states neighboring Pennsylvania have the same upside down tax system? Do other states neighboring us? Is this in New Jersey? Is this in New York? Is this in Ohio? Is this in West Virginia? Do other states neighboring Pennsylvania have the same upside down tax system? All right, we're going to give it another 5 seconds here. Get your answers in. Feel free to put it in the chat box if you want instead. All right, I'm going to end the poll. Share these results. As you can see, the majority of you, 83% of you, believe that no, that other states do not have the same upside down tax system.
Let's go on to the next slide, Lavana, and we'll see that that's in fact true. The upside down tax system that we have in Pennsylvania doesn't have to be that way. Delaware state and local tax system is right side up. People in the top 1% pay at a higher rate than people at the bottom. And that's the way it should be. And our problem in Pennsylvania is we have a uniformity clause in our state constitution that prevents us from having graduated tax rates, in which families with low incomes pay at a lower rate and families with higher incomes pay at a higher rate. Everyone pays the same flat tax. And because sales taxes and property taxes take a greater share of income from those in the middle or the bottom, our whole tax system's upside down. And that's not the only problem. Let's go on the next slide. 73% of the corporations operating in Pennsylvania, all of them who are giant multinational businesses based out of state, pay no taxes at all, pay no corporate income taxes at all. Whereas corporations that are based in the state pay at a fairly high rate. They are all based in states elsewhere, and they pay taxes. They show all their profits in states where they don't pay any taxes, and many of them is Delaware. That's why we call it the Delaware loophole. Rich people own corporations and they thus benefit from the Delaware loophole. And that's another reason why our tax system's upside down. And we're glad Governor Wolf is calling for closing the Delaware loophole, which we really strongly support. That's one solution. Now we're going to look at some other solutions to the upside down tax system. Let's go to the next slide. Governor Wolf proposes to take a small step to fix our unfair tax system. He proposes to reduce taxes on low and middle income families and raise taxes on the top 1%. The governor's plan reduces the share of income taxes for 40% of families with the lowest incomes, keeps them unchanged for the next 27%. Only the most well-off third of Pennsylvanians will pay more. And here's some data about the same income categories we've looked at before. For the lowest 20% of earners, they'd save an average of $161 a year in income taxes. The percentage they pay would drop a little bit. For the middle 20% of earners, they would save $213 a year, and their percentage would drop a bit. And for the top 1% of earners, they would see their taxes go up by $18,000 a year. Now that may sound like a lot of money, but remember their average income is $1.6 million a year. Let's go on to the next slide and you can see some more particulars of how this plan works. Governor Wolf proposes to raise the tax rate to 4.48%, but to increase a program that already exists called tax forgiveness, which would reduce taxes for people with lower incomes. So you look at parents with one child, if their earnings were under $25,000 a year, they pay no taxes at all. If their earnings were under $59,000 a year, they'd get a tax cut. If you look at a married couple with 2 kids earning under $50,000 a year, they would pay no personal income taxes in the state under the governor's plan. And a married couple with 2 kids earning under $84,000 a year would see a tax cut. The overall benefit of this can be seen in the next slide. Governor Wolf's plan raises more than $3 billion, mostly from well-off Pennsylvanians, to fund the things we all need, while cutting taxes for low and moderate income Pennsylvanians. This isn't a perfect plan. It's not as far as we want to go in making the tax system fair, but it's a really, really important first step. And Governor Wolf is the first governor that we know of who's, since I think Milton Schaap in the 70s, who's wanted to tackle the unfair tax system in Pennsylvania, and we fully support this plan. And with that, I'm going to turn the program over to Katie and Ricardo. We're going to talk about the minimum wage, and I'll see you all in a little bit.
Thank you so much, Mark and Kadita. My name is Katie Personette. I'm Deputy Director of Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center. And before I start, I want to paint a picture for you. We talk about the minimum wage. We think about jobs. We think about the job that we have. So I want to take a second and have you think about your job. If you have a job, did you work today? What did that look like? Did you work from home like so many of us are doing? Or did you get in your car, drive a little bit on this beautiful day, get to your workplace or maybe the office. Maybe you woke up this morning knowing that you had to go to work, looked out the window and said to yourself, I really want to enjoy this beautiful weather. But if you did think that, you probably thought about all the responsibilities that you have that rely on your paycheck. So you probably didn't just skip work. You probably went to work today, like here I am and many of us are. And so when you're thinking about the responsibilities that your paycheck that you rely on your paycheck for, if you own a home or rent, maybe you live with roommates, you probably are thinking about next month's rent, next month's mortgage payment. You're probably thinking about your insurance, whether that be renter's insurance or homeowner's insurance, all of the utilities that come with living in that space. And you're also probably thinking about the many bills that you have. So we're talking about credit card bills, phone bills, probably student loans, and probably a car payment if you do have a car, and car insurance as well. That's a lot to think about. And we didn't even go over the essential items, right? We didn't think about groceries or any necessary things for you to continue on every day. So many things rely on a paycheck. Now think about how you would handle all of these bills every month, every year, just earning the minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. Maybe this is a reality for some of you on this call or in Facebook world. You know the struggle. If you really think about what that looks like, you know that that looks like earning $15,000 a year. That's about $1,200 a month. Would you be able to live on that? Would that sustain your living for that month? Probably not. And I'm probably speaking to a lot of you out there who know this. So let's talk about it more. Let's dive into it. So we're going to start the first poll question.
Okay, here's your first polling question on the minimum wage. Of the 10 states that surround Pennsylvania, how many have the same minimum wage as Pennsylvania? That's the federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. How many of those 10 states have the same minimum wage as Pennsylvania? Is it 4 states? Is it 7 states? Or is it no states? How many have a similar minimum wage to us here in Pennsylvania? All right, I'm gonna wait till at least 50% of you get to vote. Feel free to put your vote in the chat box if you can't take the poll. All right, I'm gonna end now and show you the results. So it looks like the overwhelming majority, 88% of you believe that other states surrounding Pennsylvania do not have a $7.25 an hour minimum wage.
And you are correct. All of the states surrounding Pennsylvania have actually raised their wages above $7.25 an hour. In some cases, even far above. If we go to the next slide here, you'll see that New York is actually at $12.50 an hour, with Massachusetts at $13.50 an hour. And here's a question for you. Some of us think, has this cost jobs, right? If you compare jobs in low wage industries at our borders, the states surrounding us have not only seen higher wages, but they've also seen more jobs on their side of the border. And again, why, right? Because people have more money to spend in local businesses. So we're going to launch the second poll question and dive a little bit further into detail on this.
All right, thank you, Katie. All right, now question number 2. What would the minimum wage be right now if it went up with the increases in worker productivity since 1968? What would the minimum wage be right now if we kept up with productivity? What do you think? Would we be at $12.42 an hour? Would we be at $23.53 an hour? Or would we be at $8.50 an hour? What do you think? I'm gonna give it another 10 seconds here to answer this. Feel free to put your answer in the chat box if you'd like. What would the minimum wage be right now if we kept up with increases in worker productivity? We're working harder out there. What should it be? What would it be? All right, I'm going to end the results here and share. All right, we can tell here that a good amount of you, 95% of you, believe that the minimum wage would be $23.53 if it kept up with productivity.
Again, you are all correct. Pretty smart people on this call here. If the minimum wage grew as fast as our economy, it would in fact be $23.53 an hour. Because we stopped raising the minimum wage and that there are fewer people in unions, almost all the benefit of rising productivity has been going to the richest people in our country and state, which is what we just saw with our tax system as well. So with that, I'm going to pass the baton to my colleague Ricardo to finish up poll questions and the remainder of the section.
Thank you so much, Katie. Thank you everyone for joining us this evening. My name is Ricardo and I'm an organizing associate with the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center. So what are some stereotypes for a minimum wage worker? I'm sure you've heard some of the comments, right? If we can go on to the next slide, you know, you can add some more in the chat. You know, folks think that minimum wage workers are just teenagers. They work part-time or after school, live with parents. You know, they earn extra, or they're earning extra spending money. Well, if the reality of the situation is that 83% of minimum wage workers aren't teens. In fact, they're over 20 years of age or older. 32% are 40 years of age or older. 61% of them are of minimum wage workers are women. 24% of minimum wage workers have children. 65% of minimum wage workers are in fact white. 46% of minimum wage workers work full time. And then lastly, here we have 75% of minimum wage workers work 20 hours a week or more. So if we can go on to the next slide here. So what is one of the solutions or the answer to this issue here, right? So in Pennsylvania, the share of workers in each racial or ethnic group that would benefit from an increase to the minimum wage here would be drastic. In fact, here in PA, if you look nationally, there are 37% of minimum wage workers are 40 years of age or older. But when we look at this graph here, Hispanic and Black workers particularly benefit from raising the minimum wage, right? 40% of non-Hispanic Black workers would benefit. 48.4% of Hispanic workers would benefit. And then 23.8% of white workers would benefit, in addition to 25.6% of Asian workers. So what is the solution here? So if we move on to the next slide, we would, if we raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, right? It would raise the wages of 1.6 million Pennsylvanians, or 27.5% of the Pennsylvania workforce. It would also add an additional $6 billion in spending, which would support local businesses. And if you look on the graphic on the right side here, you can see that it is that our work spending would be going up drastically. All of this to say, raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour by 2027 would increase wages for 27.5% of Pennsylvania workers or 1.6 million people, and raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour would add an additional $6 billion to the Pennsylvania economy by 2027. You know, we needed to raise the wage a while ago, right? But the next best time to raise the wage is now. With that being said, I'll pass it back over to Lavana.
Hey, I'm actually going to pass it back to Mark. Mark, you're muted.
Before Mark jumps on there, I just want to remind everybody who's watching us out there in Zoom land, please keep yourselves on mute if you can. We really would appreciate that. It'd be very helpful for us as we continue on. And just know we're going to get into breakout sessions very shortly, and you'll see that at the bottom of your screen very shortly. Thank you.
We're going to talk about education, first K to 12 education. I want you to imagine a Pennsylvania where every child receives a good education. Imagine what it would feel like if you could send your child to a great public school. Imagine what that would mean for your children's prospects in a world where a good education is necessary to getting a good job. And imagine what it would mean for our economy if we encourage every child, without exception, Black, brown, and white, male and female, native born and immigrant, to make the best use of their talents and natural abilities. Imagine what that would mean if no one's talents and abilities were lost to us because they went to a school with overcrowded classrooms and inexperienced and untrained teachers in dilapidated buildings. The first step to breaking down economic, racial, and gender barriers to opportunity and to creating an economy that works for all of us is to create great schools for everyone. So let's go on to the next slide. I'm going to tell you a bit about how we analyze education in Pennsylvania. We're going to look at what we call the funding gap in Pennsylvania. And now two things are involved in the funding gap. The first is whether school districts have an adequate amount of money to provide an adequate education according to state standards. We use the term funding gap to point to the difference between how much school districts spend per student and how much they need to spend to provide an adequate education. Now, the amount that we use as our standard for an adequate education was determined by a panel of experts as required by a state law passed in 2008 by a bipartisan majority, with that data updated for 2020. The second question is, how equitable is the distribution of education funding? Do all school districts have the same level of funding, or do some school districts, such as those of low-income communities or that have more Black and Hispanic students, have less money to spend? That is, do they have a larger funding gap? So we're now going to go to a poll question and about this subject.
All right. Okay, everybody. I'm going to launch the first polling question of K through 12 education. Which schools do not spend enough to give their students an adequate education? Which schools do not spend enough to give their students an adequate education? Is it schools and communities with a high proportion of households below the poverty line? Is it schools and communities with a high and moderate proportion of households below the poverty line? Or is it all schools? What do you think? Which schools do not spend enough money to give their students an adequate education? Give you another 10 seconds to answer this. Feel free to put your answer in the chat box if you can't do this poll. All right, I'm going to end this poll and share the results. All right, it looks like the majority of you believe that schools and communities with a high proportion of households below the poverty line, 58% of you. Next up was all schools do not spend enough. And then last 10 people said schools and communities with a high to moderate proportion of households below the poverty line. So I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay, and let's go on to the next slide. The answer is all schools. We have some of the most unequally funded schools in this entire country, but 84% of schools have a funding gap. The funding gap is not equal, though, depending on the proportion of households below the poverty line. School districts in predominantly low-income communities have a funding gap of $3,167. School districts in predominantly high-income communities have a funding gap only 10% as much. That's $305. Now imagine $3,000 per student multiplied by 30 students in a classroom. That's $90,000 in a classroom. Next, we want to look at race and ethnicity. So if we go to the next slide, you can see that school districts with the highest share of Black students have a funding gap of $2,646. School districts with the lowest share of Black students have a funding gap of only $831. Again, most of the schools in the state, 84%, have a funding gap, but the gap is far greater when you're looking at school districts with a high share of Black students. Finally, let's look at the funding gap by Hispanic ethnicity. There again, we see the same thing. All school districts, or most of them, are suffering, but school districts with the highest share of Hispanic students have a funding gap of $3,132. School districts with the lowest share of Hispanic students have a funding gap of $935. So why does this problem exist? there are two big reasons. One is the state share of K-12 education funding is far below the national average of 50%. It's around 35%. School districts have to make up the difference. And school districts in low-income communities, which tend to have a higher share of Black and Hispanic students, can't raise as much for them schools, even if they have very high property taxes, which many do, as rich schools can. So that's one problem. The second problem, in the 20 years leading up to 2014, the state had a funding formula that directed state aid to the school districts that needed it most for only 3 years. Politics, not fairness, has been determining which schools get state aid. We haven't been directing state aid to schools with a high proportion of low-income students, or a high proportion of students with special needs, or a high proportion of students who don't speak English as a first language. Now, in 2015, we created a fair funding formula that does direct funds to school districts with high poverty rates and meets other needs. But the fair funding formula was only used to distribute new money added to the basic education funding form since 2015. New money was added on top of unfairly distributed old money. So let's go on to some solutions. Governor Wolf has a plan to do two big things. One is he wants to add $1.35 billion in state aid to the schools. That would raise the state's share of education funding substantially. And second, he wants to put more state aid through the fair funding formula, raising that percentage from 11% to 85%. Now we're going to look at those same different schools we looked at before, and we're going to see what impact that will have on equity and adequacy. First, by income. You recall that school districts in predominantly low-income communities had a funding gap of $3,167. Governor Wolf cuts that almost in half to $1,615. He reduces the funding gap in high-income communities as well, but just by a little bit. Much more of the funding goes to low-income communities. Governor Wolf's plan doesn't get everyone to adequacy. It doesn't eliminate all the inequity in our school system funding, but it takes a major step forward in that direction. Next, we'll look at funding by race. Again, Governor Wolf's plan cuts the school funding gap for school districts with the highest share of Black students by a major amount, almost 50%, and cuts the funding gap for school districts with the lowest share of Black students by a far smaller amount. Again, it's not a perfect proposal. It doesn't eliminate inadequacy across the board. It certainly doesn't eliminate inequity, but it's a big step forward in the right direction for the state. Finally, let's look at the last category, Hispanic ethnicity. Again, Governor Wolf's plan directs most of the money to the school districts with the highest share of Hispanic students, a lot less money to school districts with the lowest share of Hispanic students. It reduces inadequacy across the board, reduces the inequity in our school funding system. It's, again, a big step in the right direction. That's why we support it. We need to go further than that eventually, but it's something that we think ought to be done right now this year, rather this year for next year. So let's go on to higher education. And I want, before we look at the numbers, I just want you to think about what difference higher education makes. The United States, with Pennsylvania leading the way, became an economic powerhouse in the world for one big reason. We made K-12 education and then higher education available to more of our children than any other country in the world. The sad thing is that's not true anymore. Today, for every year of additional schooling in a community, the economy will be bigger by 17.4% and wages by 17.8%. Higher education helps children in the working class enter the middle class. Pennsylvania state schools were once noted for this accomplishment. Think what it means for a high school student to know that if they work hard, they will be able to go to college someday, no matter whether their parents can afford to pay for it. Think of how much hope and inspiration that gives young people. The problem, however, is that it doesn't do it anymore. The future of Pennsylvania's kids and economy are threatened by cuts to higher education. So we have a poll question we're going to ask you about.
Okay, here we go. Higher education How does Pennsylvania's investment in higher education per person living in the state compare to other states? Is it less than average investment compared to other states? Are we putting more than the average amount of investment compared to other states? Or are we average investment compared to other states? How is Pennsylvania doing? How does Pennsylvania's investment in higher education per person living in the state compare to other states? Less than average investment, more than average investment, or average investment compared to other states? All right, I'm going to just stop the poll because all of you are saying the same thing. I'm going to share the results so you can see that pretty much almost all of you, 90% of you are saying that less than average investment compared to other states. Some of you are saying average investment and some of you say maybe a little more. So I'm going to stop the share.
So let's go on to the next slide and you'll see that most of you are right. On a per person basis of all the states in the country, Pennsylvania's funding for higher education ranks 4th from the bottom. There we are, we're the orange at the bottom. The United States average is about twice as high as Pennsylvania's. We've cut higher education funding per student. That is, and that's not including inflation. That's funding per student straight on the dollars we spend by 33.4% since 2008. That's the 6th greatest cut of any state in the country. Tuition in Pennsylvania state colleges has gone up by $2,521 since 2008. And if we go to the next slide, we'll see one of the consequences of that is that we have the worst college expense. No, you went too far. We have the worst college expense burden in the entire country relative to income for white, Black, and Hispanic students. What this data shows you is how does the net price of a public four-year university at one of the state colleges relate to the median income? So for white students, it's 32% of the median income, and that's the worst in the country. But it's even worse for Black students. It's 56% of the median income of the families of Black students. And for Hispanic students, it's 48%. Again, we see the same thing that we saw in K-12 education. We have inadequate funding and inequitable funding. College costs are much too high relative to the median income of Pennsylvanians. And it's not because our median income is that low. We're fairly high in terms of median income. It's because we rank so close to the bottom in how much we spend on higher education. And if you look at the next slide, you'll see that we've spent less on higher education than we did in 2007, 2008, as I said to you. But while we've been cutting spending on higher education, we've been spending way more on corrections. Governor will propose that to reduce that a little bit, but the gap is huge. And this is really unconscionable. One reason we spend so much on corrections is we underspend on education, as I'm sure you know. So let's go on and talk about some of the solutions. So Governor Wolf has a solution. It's called the NELLIE Bly Scholarship Program. It would spend $200 million to help at least 44,000 Pennsylvania students afford state college, which they can't afford now. And the funding for that comes from the Racehorse Development Fund. We think that's a good first step, but we think it's actually insufficient. We hope it gets passed this year, but if you go to the next slide, we have a plan called the Pennsylvania Promise. And what it would do would spend $1 billion to cover 2 years of tuition and fees for any recent high school graduate at one of our 14 public community colleges, cover 4 years of tuition at any of the, for students with a family income less than $110,000 a year, going to one of the state system of higher education schools, provides 4-year grants for students going to state-related universities, and provides grants to adults without a college degree with priority given to those seeking in-demand skills and industry-recognized credentials. That's the kind of plan we think we ultimately in Pennsylvania, if we're ever going to fix our unfair and inadequate system of funding of higher education, and if we're ever going to provide real support for the students and the families and the economy of Pennsylvania that a good education system can provide. And with that, I think we're now going to move on to the housing issue, and I'm going to turn it over to LaVonna Leyendecker.
Hi, everyone. My name is LaVonna Leyendecker, and I am the Associate Director with the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center and Keystone Research Center. And I want to talk to you a little bit about the Pennsylvania budget and housing. So again, I just want to take a few seconds to think about what having a home means. So I want to take everyone back to your morning. What time did you wake up? Were you sleeping in your bed, or did you watch too much Netflix and crash on the couch? When you woke up, did you take a shower and get dressed? Were your clothes in a dresser or a closet? Did you have to raid the laundry? What did you have for breakfast? If you have kids, did your kids wake you up? And how many fights did you have about getting them to eat something this morning? These are all parts of living in a home, and I'm sure we've all, went through some part of that routine this morning, whether it's an apartment or a house or a mobile home. Most of us had a place to sleep, a place to bathe, get dressed, and launch your day. But now, for those of you who haven't experienced this, let's just imagine that you don't have a home. Maybe you got evicted from your apartment because of loss of income due to COVID. Maybe you've been struggling and you don't have a place to stay. Hopefully you have a family member or a friend who you might be able to stay with, but it's not really your house. You probably don't really have an adequate place to keep your belongings. If you have kids, maybe you slept on the floor so that they could sleep on the bed. Maybe your clothes are in a garbage bag. Maybe you don't have a person to stay with and you stayed in a shelter. You might have slept on a cot or a chair if it's full. And maybe you didn't feel safe at the shelter, so you decided to sleep rough, sleep on a bench, sleep in a park last night. And what would your morning have been like if that was your situation? That's why home is so important. It really is the foundation for everything for people. And I think that's why it's so critical that when we say that a budget is a moral document, that we think about how we're prioritizing something as important as housing and home. Now let's talk about how the Pennsylvania budget prioritizes housing. So this slide here shows the major housing and homeless assistance line items that are in the Pennsylvania budget. And they total up to about $96.18 million. Oh, sorry. We talked about this fund before, but just as an example, as a comparison, the Racehorse Development Fund is more than $200 million. So we're spending $96.18 million to make sure that everyone in Pennsylvania can afford their rent and afford adequate housing. But we're spending more than $200 million to give prize money to wealthy horse owners. So that's why we believe that there should be different prioritization for housing in Pennsylvania. So let's go move on to a polling question just to talk about the availability of affordable housing in Pennsylvania.
Okay, this is our final polling question of the evening. You made it. You answered all the questions. This is the last one. What is the percentage of extremely low-income Pennsylvanians who are severely cost burdened by the cost of their housing? Is it 50%? Is it 70% of folks who are severely cost burdened? Or is it 20% who are severely cost burdened? What is the percentage of extremely low-income Pennsylvanians who have severely cost burdened by the cost of their housing? Housing costs just too much. It's taking up too much of your money. 50%, 70%, or 20%? Still a lot of folks still answering this one. Feel free to put it in the chat box too if you can't use the poll. I'm going to end the poll now and share the results. So 82 of you watching out there today in Zoom land, 50%, 27% of you said 50%. The overwhelming majority of you, 70% of you said 70%. And then 3% of you said 20%. So I'll stop share.
So you are correct. The majority are correct. 70% of people are spending more than 50%, extremely low income people are spending more than 50% of their income on housing. And I just want to talk really quickly about the availability of what it means, what it means to be extremely low income in Pennsylvania. So extremely low income people are making on average $29,000 to $26,000 per year for a family of 4. And we gave 3 examples of counties here in Pennsylvania and showed the average median income, which is a rural county, a suburban county, and an urban county, and then what the extremely low income limit is for a family of 4. Now you'll note here that the rural and urban counties are the same. That's because the agency that determines this, HUD, has a bottom limit. So they're not going to go below $26,000 per year in order to provide subsidy. So that's why those 2 numbers are the same. So in Pennsylvania, there are only 38 affordable units available for every 100 extremely low income renter households that are looking for one. That means that 62 families or individuals are either homeless or doubled up or living in inadequate housing right now. Of every 100, that means that 62 people or families are without adequate housing. And like we said, of the extremely low income renter households, 70% pay more than half of their income on rent. And for those of you who live in Pennsylvania, you also know that not only are extremely low income people affected by our high housing prices, but even moderate income people are extremely cost burdened and spending more than 50% of their income on rent. So that is a big challenge, and for all groups across the board, and is really hurting working Pennsylvanians. So how much do you need to work in order to afford your rent in Pennsylvania? If you're working at a minimum wage job and getting paid $77.25 per hour, you would have to work 86 hours to afford a 1-bedroom apartment at the fair market rent in our state. You would have to make $19.23 an hour to work a 40-hour work week to afford a 2-bedroom apartment in Pennsylvania. And when we think about the extremely low income renter households, I think it's important to understand who we are talking about. So the majority of people or families who are making $26,000 for a family of 4 or under are either seniors or disabled people or caregivers, someone who is taking care of a children or a disabled relative. But a large portion of the extremely low income renter households are also in the labor force and are working full time. So these are people who are doing everything they can to earn enough income to pay for housing. And as we've seen from previous slides, in most cases, they're not even coming close. So what are the solutions? I think the biggest solution that we could have here in Pennsylvania is to prioritize renter subsidies. Now, the American Rescue Plan that was just passed through Congress and signed by President Biden has a really large subsidy for renters due to the COVID pandemic, because so many people lost their income and can't pay their rent. And we need to make sure that that money gets out to renters equitably and efficiently. We should also think of this as an opportunity to make the argument that we should always have a dedicated renter subsidy line item in the Pennsylvania state budget, and we should think about how to fund that. The other thing we could do is provide more funding to rehabilitate older and deteriorated homes. Our problem is not that we don't have enough available housing stock. our problem is that we don't have enough of that housing stock that's adequately provided for that people could live in, that it's safe, that it's warm, that rain doesn't come through the roof. And there are ways that we could rehab that housing, and that would be a very efficient way to provide more affordable housing. Also, we could provide help for paying for utilities. Utility costs are another big reason why people lose their homes, because they can't afford to stay in a place and pay for the utilities. So we could be subsidizing that along with the rental subsidies. And then finally, we could raise the minimum wage. If people were earning more money, they would be able to afford to live in adequate and safe housing. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Mark.
All right, I'm actually going to take it from here. We can take the PowerPoint down, and we're going to now break out. We're going to break out into some breakout rooms. Okay. How's everybody doing out there? How's everybody doing? Are you still hanging in there? All right, you're still hanging in. All right, let's get here to a gallery view so we can see you all. All right. You all got some really good information. What did you think? Thumbs up? If you know the reactions down at the bottom, was it a thumbs up on the information? Did everybody learn something so far? Yes, great information. Lots of thumbs going up. All right, this is great. This is the whole point of this, is that we want to provide you with the information that you need so that you can advocate for yourselves. So I'm looking here in the Zoom room, and we've been joined by another representative. Representative Maureen Madden is with us, as well as Representative Patty Kim. So thank you for our state representatives who are with us this evening. We love to have your presence here. All right, so this is the fun part now. So there are still a good amount of you here today. So we're going to now break out into some breakout rooms by region, so that we can talk about this on a more targeted level. So we're going to break out by region so that you can have good conversation in these breakout rooms about what you heard today. Give us some feedback about what you heard today. And hopefully you'll want to have presentations such as this in your communities. So this is how we're going to do this. Those of you who are in the Spanish interpretation room, Uriel, if you're hearing me, get everybody to, we're going to stop interpretation here for a second. That's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to stop interpretation. We're going to bring everybody else back in here for the moment. So what we're going to do now is you're going to self-select a breakout room that you want to go to. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that so you can see. This is technology, y'all. How are you loving Zoom land now, right?
So todos ustedes pueden seleccionar su salón de conferencia ahora.
Right, we're going to get into breakout rooms. So what you're going to see, I'm going to open these rooms up. You hopefully should see this on your screen. If not, you can go down to the bottom where it says breakout room. And I want you to self-select for yourselves where you want to go. If you are someone who lives in central Pennsylvania, or what you may have heard, the T area of the state, please put yourself in that breakout room. You can just scroll over the area there and you can put yourself in that room. Just scroll over it so you can see where you want to go. Put yourself in that room. The T in central Pennsylvania, Ashley and Adrian, excuse me, will be in that room. If you live in southwestern Pennsylvania, which includes Pittsburgh for this instance, southwestern Pennsylvania, including Pittsburgh, go into the room with Aaron and Lee. If you're someone who wants to go into northeastern Pennsylvania, the Lehigh Valley and surrounding areas, go with Katie and Mason. If you're someone who lives in southeastern Pennsylvania, that includes Philadelphia, go into the breakout room with Lavana and Kirsten. And if you're someone who lives in northwestern Pennsylvania, which includes Erie and all of those areas there, go into the breakout room with Mark and Erica. If you are not able to see this, to do this, I'm going to help you, but please just scroll over the area, hover over that area there and join a breakout room. Scroll down into
Vaya al globo abajo y puede ir al salón virtual de su región.
All right. Is everybody getting into the breakout rooms?
Todo el mundo debe estar en sus
I need help, Querida.
Okay, scroll over your name there. Do you scroll over there? Do you see where you're going, Aaron? You're going to Southwest. If you scroll around Southwest, you should be able to join to the far right.
Por favor, colóquese en la sección del estado que usted pertenece.
I'm going to just put some folks in there that I know need to go. I think I can do that.
I'm on my iPad and I can't see the breakout rooms. I'm in Northeast.
Okay, hold on one second and I'll be able to help everybody who can't get in there.
Okay.
Southwest. Aaron, I sent you out. Okay. Erica Freeman needs to go. Erica Freeman needs to go to Northwest. I'm going to send her there. Let's see who's left in here. Lee Owens. Lee Owens needs to go into
Southwest.
West. I'm putting you into Southwest. All of this. Mason needs to go into Northeast.
Si usted tiene alguna pregunta de en qué salón puede pertenecer, tiene que pertenecer, póngalo en el chat, por favor.
All right. So I have Britt. Britt, where would you like to go? Come off mute and tell where you want to go. All right. Anybody, just one person want to come off mute and tell me where you want to go.
I need to go southeast.
Say your
Me
name.
too. Oh, no.
Say your name, please. Who wants to go to Southeast?
Jake, John Marshall.
John wants to go to Southeast. Okay. Someone else want to come off mute?
I'm Pamela. I want to go to Northeast.
Pamela wants to go to Northeast.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Pamela is going to Northeast. Oh, I see.
Para
Representative.
los que hablan español se pueden quedar en la sala de español, no tienen que irse a su región.
Representative Fiedler. I'm going to put you into Philadelphia.
Repito, los que quieran quedarse en la sala de español se pueden quedar ahí, no por región.
Gary Horton. I think Gary Horton lives in Erie. I think I know you, Gary Horton. We're going to put you in Erie. Okay. Jill. Hi, Jill. Jill Sunday. Hi, Jill.
Confused. I'm kind of South Central, Cumberland County.
Okay, we're going to put you there. All right. Who else? Ezra. Hey, Ezra. I'm going to put you in the Central. Britt, you still there? Britt, where do you want to go? Catalina, Danielle? Mia and Jen, okay, I'm going to just
Spanish. Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Spanish.
Danielle, Britt. All right. If you're out there watching this on Facebook Live, hello. Good to see you. We have just now going to admit Representative Hohenstein. Representative, good that you joined us. We just have folks going into breakout rooms. Representative Hohenstein, we're going to put you into your breakout room. What counties do you represent?
Northeast Philly.
Northeast Philly. Okay, that's right. We're going to put you over there. Sending you out. Southeast PA. All right, if you're out there watching us on Zoom land right now, thank you for being with us. We have sent all of the participants of today's event into breakout rooms by region. And I'm going to admit some more folks as they're coming in, and I'll talk to you in a second. So thank you all for being with us out there. So we're having a great event here today. We started at 7 o'clock tonight. It's going to go on till 8:30. We have some folks right now in breakout rooms. They're broken out by region. We're having conversations about tonight's presentation. They're giving us some feedback. You know, maybe they learned some things. Maybe there's some things we can improve for this presentation. We're asking them questions about the presentation. If they like the polling questions, if you're watching this out there in Facebook land, let us know in the comment section. How did you like the polling questions? Was it interactive enough for you? Did it give you some information? Would love to also know where the slides that you saw, the slide presentations, were they easy to understand? Were we speaking on a level that everyone out there can understand? We want to know that if you're watching this out there on Facebook right now. Were the topics that we discussed important? Were there other topics you'd like us to discuss next time? Tonight we talked about housing, we talked about minimum wage, we talked about education, public education, higher, K through 12. We Talked about the minimum wage. We talked about fair taxation. We live in an upside down tax state here in Pennsylvania. This Commonwealth is upside down. The rich do not pay their fair share here in the state, which doesn't help us when we're trying to invest in things that other folks here in the state need. So right now, if you're watching us and you're joining and watching us on Facebook, we have folks that are going into breakout rooms right now and having conversation, broken out into the Northwest, Northeast, Southeast, Southwest, Central Pennsylvania, the T area. And then also we have a Spanish language breakout room. So those who need access to hearing all this information in Spanish can have all this information in Spanish. So thankful that you all are joining us tonight out there in Facebook. So thank you for being with us. All right. So if you are watching us, please feel free to put into the comment section anything that you're walking away from tonight's presentation with. We'd love to know where you're joining us from. Put that down there as well. If you're watching on Facebook, let us know where you're joining us from. Again, tonight we talked about housing, minimum wage. We talked about, fair housing. It's so expensive, housing. It just hasn't kept up. And the fact that minimum wage here in the state of Pennsylvania is at $7.25 an hour, the federal level, and we haven't moved compared to other states across the country, puts us in a precarious situation here. Folks cannot afford rent because we're not paying enough. Jobs are not paying enough. It's time to give Pennsylvanians a raise. We can do that by raising the minimum wage. And there's lots of facts and myths out there because there's some folks who don't believe that minimum wage workers are like adults, and they are. They are. So we need to overcome some of these myths to find out who it is that's making $7.25 an hour. Who is making $9 an hour? Who would benefit from a $12 an hour minimum wage here in the state? Representative Patty Kim in Dauphin County, she has House Bill 345, trying to raise the minimum wage. Started at $12 an hour right now, and then launch it to $15 an hour by 2027. So they're talking about that right now in these breakout rooms. They're also talking about housing. You heard Lavana Leyen-Decker from Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center talk about the housing issues we have in the state. Low-income folks are cost burdened by housing. They're spending too much of their money on housing. If you're spending 70% of your income on housing, that leaves you 30% to pay for car, if you have a car, or transportation, period. A cost for clothing on your children's backs, food on the table, utilities in the home. Can't even account for the fact you might want to take your child out when we get out of this pandemic to a movie, right? So we're paying 70% of your income in housing. You have nothing left for everyday living. Too much in the state of Pennsylvania. We talked about the upside down tax system in the state of Pennsylvania. Folks here, the wealthy, the top 1%, these are folks who are averaging $1.6 million a year in income. That's the top 1% in Pennsylvania's average income. Those folks are not paying their fair share in taxes. States like Delaware, they have not a flat tax, they don't have a flat tax, but the rich are paying pretty much the same percentage as those in the low income. But here in Pennsylvania, those in lower incomes are paying a bigger percentage of their money in taxes compared to the rich. We don't tax enough. Let's not talk about all the billionaires that have been created since this pandemic. We also talked about K through 12 funding and higher education funding. If you're watching this for the first time now, joining us on the Facebook Live, just know that we have breakout rooms going on right now. So you can't join those because you're watching us on Facebook. Next time, join us in the Zoom room so you could be included in these breakouts. But they're in these breakout rooms and they're talking about these issues. We talked about the funding gap in K through 12 education, depending upon what zip code you live in, kind of determines what kind of education you get here in the state of Pennsylvania. But Governor Wolf does have a plan to close that funding gap. We can close that gap here in Pennsylvania. We can fund all of our schools fairly. We don't do that. Not only that, even the richer communities here in Pennsylvania, their schools aren't even funded fairly enough for an adequate education. We can do better. We can do better. So we're talking about education. We're talking about higher education. Here in the state of Pennsylvania, incomes are going to paying for college. Too much of people's income is going to paying for college. College is not affordable for so many at this point. I'm someone coming to you today, student loan debt. I know what it's like. Pennsylvanians have a lot of student loan debt. That's because the cost of education is so high. All right, I'm admitting somebody in here. So right now, if you're just joining us, we have all these participants are off in breakout rooms. Anita, you are live on Facebook right now. Anita, please tell me where you live in the state so I can send you to a breakout room. Where do you live, Anita? You're in Northwestern Pennsylvania, Southeastern Pennsylvania. Where are you, Anita?
Oh, you can hear me?
Yes, where are you?
Okay, I'm off of City Avenue. I guess that's considered western part of?
You're in Philadelphia, City Light Avenue.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna send you Southeastern Pennsylvania. All right, so people are joining, still coming into the Zoom a little. Okay, so this is what we're doing today. Or this evening. Right now, folks are in breakout rooms by region. They're talking about the issues. We're having a town hall. This is what you have to do now in pandemic times. We can't meet in person at the moment. We can't meet at a library. We can't meet at a city hall and have these conversations. We're doing this on Zoom. And right now we have lots of folks in different breakout rooms talking about the issues that are very important to them. We talked about housing, we talked about K through 12 and higher education here in the state. We talked about tax fairness, the fact that we need to have a more fair tax system in the state. We don't tax fairly in the state of Pennsylvania. Talked about housing. Talked about the minimum wage. We need to raise the minimum wage here in the state of Pennsylvania. $7.25 an hour is ridiculous. It's ridiculous for everybody. I don't care if you're a teenager or you're an adult. Teenagers have bills that they are paying as well. They have college they need to afford. $7.25 is not a lot of money. Not for any job. There is dignity in all work. All workers deserve a raise here in Pennsylvania. Every single state surrounding us has a higher minimum wage than Pennsylvania. Every single one. And they have raised their minimum wage not just once, but twice since the federal $7.25 minimum. West Virginia is above $8.50 an hour. New Jersey, New York, they're on a plan. They're at $12 or more at the moment, going to $15. And the argument that folks who live in Elk County or Clarion County don't need to make a greater minimum wage, every single county in Pennsylvania needs to earn a higher minimum wage. Housing is expensive. Education is expensive. The price of goods have gone up. The price of housing has gone up. The price of milk has gone up. But the prices that the money that we're taking in has not. Minimum wage is still too low. So thank you for those of you who are out there joining us. We have folks in breakout rooms. We have Representative Maureen Madden with us this evening. We have Representative Patty Kim. We have Representative Hohenstein with us this evening. They're in breakout rooms. It's an opportunity for them to talk to their constituents about these issues that matter. So next time, join us in the Zoom room. You'd have access to all of this good conversation that's happening. So they're going to be in the Zoom room for like another 5 minutes. And so you're stuck with me out here. And I'm going to actually go onto the Facebook Live and see what we're talking about. If anybody has any questions for me, since you can't talk to me because I'm in the Zoom room. Give me a second here. But we are right now almost 100 people joining this Zoom event tonight. They're in breakout rooms by region, talking about the issues that matter to them the most. I'm not going to be able to see that without making a lot of noise. So we thank you for being with us tonight. We talked about a lot of issues. We're talking about housing in the state of Pennsylvania. We're talking about raising the minimum wage. We're talking about tax fairness and our upside down tax system, where the top 1% in Pennsylvania, these are the folks whose income is averaging $1.6 million a year. That's what's rich. A lot of times we get confused on what's rich. What's the wealthy? When we talk about the 1%, it's not those folks making $100,000 a year. It's not those folks making $400,000 a year. The top 1% in Pennsylvania are folks who are averaging $1.6 million a year in income, and they are not paying their fair share. We have an upside down tax system here in the state, which allows that to be so, and we can do a better job. All right, housing. Too many people cannot afford the housing here in the state of Pennsylvania. If you take 100 people in the state, 38 of them, they are cost burdened by their housing. Cost burden, they can't find affordable housing. They can't even find affordable housing. That's an issue here in the state of Pennsylvania. And all of this goes back to minimum wage. So many of these problems could be erased if we were to raise the minimum wage. People are not making enough. There's dignity in all work. No job should pay $7.25 an hour in the year 2021. And we know that's so because every single state around us has increased their minimum wage beyond $7.25, except for Pennsylvania. And they're all still doing well. They all still are able to buy a slice of pizza for 99 cents. The prices of goods have not increased that much. And if they do, you think about the productivity that's happening in these workforces when they raise the wage. It's just one cost of operating business. So that argument that, the cost of all the goods are going to rise, that your burgers will no longer be $1.29 at McDonald's, they'll go up to $5 an hour. Well, that didn't happen in Jersey. Jersey's minimum wage, $12 an hour. We can do this in Pennsylvania. It's been far too long, more than 13 years legislatively, us trying to raise the minimum wage in the state. It's about time to give Pennsylvanians a raise. We work hard. Minimum wage earners deserve it. And here we are in the global pandemic, and we're finding out who are essential workers. Essential workers are these folks who are making $9 an hour, who are taking care of our kids, who are making $10 an hour with an associate's degree and have student loans to pay. I will be joined by someone here in the Zoom room. And if you're watching us on Facebook, just know that we have lots of folks in breakout rooms by region, talking to either the state reps or the state reps are with them, or talking to facilitators and asking lots of questions. Asuka, I hope I'm saying that right. Asuka Shea, where do you live in Pennsylvania so I can send you to your breakout room? Are you in Philly? Are you in Pittsburgh? Are you in Dauphin County? Asuka, you can come off mute and tell me where you live so I can put you in your appropriate room. All right, we're just going to go into Erie, Asuka. Okay. All right, so thank you for joining us out there. We're glad that you're joining us on Facebook Live. This is the benefit of joining the Zoom room, is that right now we have lots of folks in breakout rooms. If you're watching this wondering where everybody is, what kind of town hall is going on, well, the town hall is happening by region. Everybody's in a room. All the Southeastern Pennsylvania folks are together, all the Northwestern folks are together, and they're talking about these issues. We all have all of these issues that we're working on here. So minimum wage, we've got to raise it. Housing, we got to make it more affordable. Our upside down tax system, we have to make it more fair. We can tax the wealthy on their wealth. We have a uniformity clause here in the state of Pennsylvania where we can't just raise taxes on rich folks. You can't do that. That's part of our Pennsylvania Constitution. But we can tax the wealthy on their wealth, the things that most of us don't have. Right? We could tax them on lottery winnings. We could tax them on their earnings from stocks and bonds. So there is a way around the uniformity clause. All right, I see Nick and Matt joined us back. Did you leave your rooms? You all left your rooms? All right, I see Representative Hohenstein is back. Folks are joining. All right, I'm gonna close the rooms down. Give those folks 60 seconds. Since folks are joining us back in the Zoom room. Thanks for joining us. We're still waiting for everybody to come back in. I hope you enjoyed this evening's conversation. Folks are coming back into the main room. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us. How was it? How was the breakout room? Does anyone want to come off mute? Tell us how it went. Thumbs up. I see Nick with thumbs up. All right. Yes, Barb. Thank you. Representative Hohenstein, good to see you.
Good to see you. I haven't been speaking much. I was mostly listening, which is a better way for me to be, I think, in a space like this. So, right. But it was good. Heard a lot of really good things.
Great. All right, folks are coming back into the main room. If this was not COVID times, we'd be probably in a library right now or City Hall, and we'd be walking back in from any kind of breakout room we were in. And now we're coming back into the main room. All the folks who are in breakout rooms are coming back in. There's Uriel. Hi, Uriel. I'm sorry I sent you away, Uriel. Hope you enjoyed it. I had a good time out here by myself. It was all good. Okay, folks are coming back in.
We had a good time. We rocked it. Sorry.
All right. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you. We're looking forward to seeing all the feedback that we get, all the notes that we're taking in the breakout rooms. Everybody still joining us? We're coming back into
So we got a lot of volunteers to do the presentation. So
we're getting some good comments in the chat box here. Folks enjoyed the breakout sessions. That was great. Some of you had some of your legislators with you. We had at least 3 representatives with us today in the call. Ivana is going to launch us.
Recibimos muchas buenas comunicaciones de todos.
Yep. We're going to
Esperamos
launch,
poder tener presentaciones con ustedes.
and I'm going to open up the interpretation room. All right. All right. Those who speak monolingual Spanish are going back into interpretation room so they can hear this entire presentation. And we're going to wrap up now. Give us a second here, make sure everybody's in where they need to go to hear this. All right. Okay. All right. Mark Steer, back to you. Might be on mute. Mark Steer.
Sorry. Before I go back to the presentation, I just want to say Representative Elizabeth Fiedler was here. She's one of the leaders of the People's Budget process in the General Assembly, so we thank her for being here. And now let's just talk about what do we do with all this information. Well, here's one thing. We know this pandemic has exposed real deep inequities in our society, and we have an opportunity to deal with them. The American Rescue Plan, which President Biden put forward and the Congress proposed, is really an unprecedented opportunity to rebuild our communities and create an infrastructure for justice. It's an opportunity for, it brings lots of money into the state, but we've got to take advantage of that money, and we've got to use it to help people, to create an economy that works for everyone, to take care of people's immediate needs, but also to create a just future. So if we go to the next slide, I want to talk about what we think Pennsylvania should do. What should be part of a people's budget? We've talked about a bunch of issues today. I'll summarize them here, but there are other things we haven't been able to talk about that we also think should be on the people's budget. And we'll be having opportunities to talk about them later with you in forums like this or in individual forums. But let me go through some of the big things. Number one, we've got to raise wages and provide hazard pay. We've talked about creating a path to 15 minimum wage. Representative Patty Kim, the sponsor of that bill, is here with us. We also want to eliminate the tip minimum wage and allow local communities to raise their own minimum wage above the state level. We want to adjust the minimum wage for inflation. As the costs go up, minimum wage should go up too. And we want stronger laws to punish those who cheat on their wages, who don't pay their workers enough. We also think we should create a state fund to provide hazard pay to frontline workers. People have been putting their lives on the line at a time when those of us who have resources can work from home and do Zoom calls all day long. Some people couldn't do that. Some people were in the grocery stores. Some people were in the restaurants that are open. Some people in other stores. Some people were in office buildings and taking care of them and fixing cars and doing things like that. There are a lot of frontline workers who need hazard pay. We need to fix our unemployment compensation. I think we all know how hard it's been in Pennsylvania, and not just our state. People who deserve money not being able to get it. So that's one thing we need to do. We also need to expand the safety net. We need a paid family and medical leave fund, and we can use the ARP money to start it. We need earned sick days, and again, the ARP money can help us. We need to fully fund childcare programs. There are almost 10,000 children who are waiting for childcare subsidies from the state. We've got a good program, but not everyone who deserves being on the program can get it because there's just not enough money. And we need an excluded workers fund because we know a lot of the benefits, including the ones I've been talking about, have not been available to non-citizens and not been able to immigrants, both documented and undocumented. It's time to create a special fund. If the federal government won't do it, Pennsylvania can do it. New York just did it, a special excluded workers fund to benefit them. We need to expand equal access to education. Now, I've talked about that already, so I'm not going to repeat myself. We want the governor's plan on K-12 funding, the Nellie plan, and the Pennsylvania Promise. We need to reform taxes. Now, we're not going to get Governor Wolf's tax reform plan this year because the General Assembly doesn't have to raise taxes to balance the budget. The American Rescue Plan can help with that. But we can get a down payment on tax fairness with what we're going to call a recovery grant to low-income Pennsylvanians. You saw that the governor's plan proposed to lower taxes for low-income Pennsylvanians. If we can't do that, why don't we just send them checks and let them benefit from this down payment on our tax fairness plan? Something we haven't been able to talk about is supporting local businesses. Now, we know a lot of small businesses have been damaged by the pandemic, and there's money in the American Rescue Plan for them, and we might want to supplement it with other money. but there isn't money so far that we've seen to help provide startup capital and technical assistance and commercial corridor development programs to help entrepreneurs in low income and Black and brown communities. We know those communities are suffering. We know that those communities are suffering from a big spike in murders and other crime. And one of the reasons they're suffering from that is because of the effect of the pandemic. We need to give people opportunities in those communities, and a community investment strategy funded by the ARP would be able to do that. Levana talked about building a short-term rental assistance program that is designed to go further and become a long-term rental assistance program that would help people afford housing who can't afford it right now. Now, we can start this with the ARP money, but the ARP money, even if it's $7 billion for the state, it's going to run out. So we got to be prepared to raise taxes on the top 1% and on Pennsylvania's corporations that pay nothing, so that we have the money, not just to create these programs, but to sustain them over the long term and make sure that these programs are available to reduce inequity for everyone in the state, to give everyone an opportunity in the state. And speaking of inequity and opportunity, we have to make sure that all programs I'm talking about are open to immigrants, both documented and undocumented. The Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center is coming out with a report in the next 2 weeks about the incredible contribution that immigrants make, both documented and undocumented ones. They do a lot of the work in the state. They help our economy, yet they have not been benefiting from the various programs to help people recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. It's time to open all those programs to everyone. There are probably other things, and we want to hear from you about what else should be in this in the Pennsylvania budget, in a people's budget. We're just getting started with this plan. We're gonna keep talking to you. We're gonna keep getting information from you. We're gonna hear from you and expand this program. But there's a lot of stuff you can do too, and that to help get the kinds of change we need in Harrisburg. And I want to turn it back to Khadija, who's going to tell us what you can do to keep building momentum for people's budget.
All right, everybody. We're running out of time here. We came right to an end. Pretty good time today. We did this. We timed this pretty well. So I hope you all are enjoying what's happening out here. But here's the thing. I'm glad that you're with us tonight. I'm glad you got this information. Now you need to share it. We had about 100 of you tonight. We need to talk to 100,000 of you tonight. So here's what we need for all of you to do. Be a part of creating the people's budget, a budget that taxes the rich Pennsylvanians and uses the American Rescue Plan, you'll also hear of this being called the ARP, to address inequities in funding and in housing. So we want you to go to our action page. Ricardo is sharing this right now in the chat box. He's sharing for you to go to an action page to support the people's budget. It's a quick action you can take. Please share this, learn this information, share it with your friends and your neighbors. We also want you to host events. Hopefully you heard this in your breakout rooms. We want you to host events just like this in your communities. We'll give you the slides. We'll give you a facilitator's information. We want you to hold events just like this where you live. And also register to vote. You must register to vote, and not only vote, but go out and vote. We must ensure that we're exercising our right to vote. It's so important, all right? The proof that one truly believes is in action. We're asking you to take that action. I'm telling you right now, if you click on that link, that action that you just got seen in the chat box there by Ricardo, you can take 45 seconds of your day and send a letter to your legislator, letting them know it is time to have a people's budget here in the state of Pennsylvania. So I hope you enjoyed tonight's presentation. A lot of work went into this. A shout out, big shout out to all of my colleagues at the Keystone Research Center, the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center. A big shout out to Mark Steer and all the work that he did to put together these PowerPoints, and those who went through the nitty gritty of that and putting the fonts together and all that. So Erica and Adrian and everyone involved in making tonight happen. Our partners, Are We the People campaign partners, our leadership team, CASA, SEIU, Power, Communication, Commonwealth Communication, C-Squared, Make the Road, One Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania Stands Up, Black Voters Matter, For Our Future, PA United, and SIX, otherwise known as the State Innovation Exchange. We want to thank you all for putting this together with us this evening, all the hard work, and those who presented tonight. The slides were fantastic. The information was fantastic. Lots of great feedback in the comments section. So thank you, Mark, Thank you, Katie and Ricardo and Lavana for all of that. Got Kirsten out there too. I know Mason, I'm forgetting folks. I'm sorry. It blame my brain and not my heart. And I want to thank all of you for being with us this evening. I want to thank the facilitators, the Mendoza group who helped facilitate all of the Spanish language translation that you're seeing this evening, that you will see later if you want to hold one of these meetings, in your communities. So thank you. Thank you to everyone who watched tonight and stayed with us. There's so many places you could be. Thursday night is good TV, but you're here with us. So thank you for wanting to get this information and share this information. Lots of questions, people wondering about, is this going to be seen or is it recording? This is recorded. It's also on Facebook Live. So if you're on Facebook, you can watch this tonight immediately. Otherwise, we'll send out a thank you tomorrow to all of those who participated and attended so that you can have the link to watch this presentation. If you want the slides, if you want the PowerPoint presentation here, if you want the modules so that you can present this in your communities, I hope that you communicate it with someone in your breakout room about that. Otherwise, you'll get a thank you from us and you can respond back if there's something else you need. All right, so you should also know, thank you, Kirsten. This will be aired on PCN next week, on PCN television for those of you who get that. You can watch this again on TV. So thank you so much. Thank you to everyone that's out there watching, the KRC team, Keystone Research Center, Stephen Herzenberg. I think he had to jump off, but he was with us this evening. All the folks, I can't even mention them all. Stephanie over there helping to put these graphics together. It's a lot of work that goes into breaking this down. We're a wonky shop here at Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center. We're used to creating these slides for, professors and state representatives. We wanted to make sure we were able to give it to you this evening on a level that you understand. So thank you for being with us tonight. Thank you for being with us and sharing this out. The proof that one truly believes is in action. Share this out. We need to get to more people. We'll be back again.
Kadita, before you stop, I want to say one thing.
Yes.
As many of you may know, Kadita's going to be leaving us after 4 years. She's been instrumental in the development of and expansion of the We the People campaign and in building these events. I want to thank her and want you all to thank her for the great work she's done and wish her Godspeed in the new work she's going to be doing. And we're going to miss her leadership, but we're not stopping. We're going to be announcing a new campaign director very soon, who's great. And we're just getting this We the People campaign and this People's Budget on going now. And we hope for your help. Invite us into your homes, invite us into your organizations, take the material and run with it. Let's get this whole state signed up for a People's Budget. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Kadita, and thank
We
you
love you,
everyone for your
Kadita.
work.
Thank you. Hey, this wouldn't be a court rally without the waving. So we're back in gallery view. Love you all. Thank you for everything that you're out there doing. Thank you for being with us this evening. Please know, thank you, Mark, for letting the folks know. I'm not going far. I'm still going to stay in Pennsylvania, and we're going to fight to make sure you all have the right to vote and access the ballot. That's what we're going to do. The new Pennsylvania project. That's what it's going to be all about. So thank you all. Thank you for being with us tonight. Appreciate you. Appreciate you.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you very